Everyone's heard that money makes the world go round. And as a matter of fact, it's one of the big three ways that you can see a very drastic change in your quality of life. Now, if you're unfamiliar, the big three are health, wealth, and relationships. And there are thousands and thousands of hours of content out there on these topics. So much so that it's hard to know what's important and what isn't, what works and what doesn't. And that leads us to cash flow. For finances, it is the quintessential idea behind everything. If you understand cash flow and how it works, everything else will fall into place and you will do well financially. Let's take budgeting, for example. It's a place that most people start when they're getting into personal finances, because if they want to have more money, they need to earn more or spend less. If you spend less than you earn, then you're going to save money. Now, for the average person like you and like me, this means that we are comparing our salary to our expenses. As we go on and as we get better and better and better at playing the game of finances, it will eventually mean it is our assets versus our expenses. Now, let's look back at that budgeting example. It's interesting because budgeting is a literal cash flow analysis. You're looking at every dollar that you make, you're deciding where you want it to go, and then you're spending it. Now, if you're doing this correctly, then every dollar should have a job. And it could be anything. It could be putting gas in your car, which is really expensive right now. It could be putting food on the table, or it could be saving for a vacation, whatever it is. Now, if your income exceeds your expenses, you're already doing better than most people. And understanding this base level of cash flow is important. It can dramatically change your life because it can take you from working for your money to having your money work for you. If you don't understand what I'm saying, let's paint a picture real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. Let's take someone who's rich, right? They have $1 million. By the standard American standards, that's a lot of money. And then let's take someone else who is wealthy. They also have $1 million. But the second person has their money invested in rental properties. Say they have 10 properties, they charge $1,000 a month for each property, and after they pay their insurance and their taxes and they fix all this stuff, let's say they're making $500 of profit per property. So that would be like $5,000 a month. Now, over the course of 30 years, the person who has $1 million, who is rich, doesn't do anything with it, they just hold it, and they live on it, right? They spend $5,000 every month to survive. That's great, but at the end of between 16 and 17 years, that they're going to run out of that money. It's going to be gone. Now, the person, on the other hand, who had that money invested in a cash flowing asset was making $5,000 a month, living on that same $5,000 a month. At the end of that 17 years, those properties are still paying them $5,000 a month. And if they wanted the $1 million, they would have to go and sell the property. But for all of their smaller expenses, they would be paid for. This is the idea behind cash flow. It's not how much money you have today, it's how much money you'll get over the lifespan of an asset. The incredible thing about this is it doesn't stop at 17 years down the road. Those rental properties could pay you for 30, 40, or 50 years. And if you're a really far out thinker, then maybe you realize you can pass them to your descendants and they could pay your kids and your kids' kids and your kids' kids' kids for 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 years or more. This is very important to understand because you're no longer working for your money, it's paying you. You've now developed wealth. And that's the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Being rich is having money. Being wealthy is having time. Now, this underlying idea behind cash flow is the same reason that companies and businesses all over feel really good about spending $1,000 a month on marketing, or thousands of dollars a month on loan payments, or $1,000 a month on accountants, or anything that they don't see a direct return on immediately. Like, let's take an advertiser, for example. Let's say they spend $5,000 running an ad, and because of that, they sell $20,000 worth of product, and it generates an extra $15,000 of profit. So this is awesome, right? And then they subtract that $5,000 from the $15,000 profit, and then you have a net profit of $10,000. Because of that $5,000 they were willing to spend, the company made an extra $10,000 in positive cash flow. Now, this is really interesting to understand because it's the same way that it could work for you and for me in a rental property, right? Say we buy a rental property with $10,000 down and it cash flows, $2,000 a year for us, then over our lives, we're going to get that $10,000 back several times over. It's important to understand this because this is the fundamental idea behind all personal finances. All of your investments, all of your, optimization, everything goes towards your cash flow. You decrease your taxes to increase your cash flow. You earn more to increase your cash flow. You decrease your spending to increase your cash flow. It's all about cash flow, guys. And the reason this is so important is because if we look at like the standard American and the idea that we want to retire at 50 or 60 years old, then you need to understand how much money you need to make it for the next 40 years. Now, lifespans are getting longer and longer and longer. People are wanting to retire earlier and earlier and earlier. And if we want to do this, we need to know how much money we need. Now, the question is, how much money do you spend every month? Because if you spend $3,000 a month, then you can figure out the amount of cash flow you need, right? Because, wow, you guessed it, you need the cash flow of your expenses. And this is really interesting because it can tell you how many stocks, how many rental properties, how many businesses you need to own in order to fund the rest of your life. And if you do this correctly, you could take a 25-year-old who has, $3,000 in cash flowing assets per month, and then he could retire. There's no reason you have to wait until 65, right? And the idea is that if you do this properly, it should never run out of money. It should always pay you forever. And as long as you understand this one basic idea, you will be headed in the correct direction financially. It is the cornerstone of how we make all of our other financial decisions. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Hope you learned something. Until next time, peace.